Hi, folks. Good evening. I just wanted to call your attention. My name is Millie Donovan. I'm a library assistant here at Stonington Free Library, and I am so happy on behalf of Michaela, Hall, Carla, Umland, and the volunteers of the programming committee to introduce and welcome our guest presenter, Karen Guzman. Karen is a fiction writer and essayist. Her newest novel Arborview, which is right here and for sale in the back, was published by the Wild Rose Press in September 2021. Her debut novel, Homing Instincts, was published by Fiction Addict Press in 2014. Karen's short fiction has appeared in a number of literary magazines, and her story collection, Pilgrims, was a finalist for the St. Lawrence Book Award. Karen is a regular contributor to the Collegeville Institute's Bearings Online magazine, and she is the recipient of a 2021 Writing Fellowship at the Collegeville Institute. Karen has worked as a journalist at the Hartford Courant in Hartford, Connecticut, and at the News and Observer in Raleigh, North Carolina. She holds a BS in journalism from Boston University and an MFA degree from George Mason University. Karen is currently a resident of Durham, Connecticut, but fun fact, she has deep ties to southeastern Connecticut, having fallen in love with and married a boy from Ledyard 20 years ago at the Mystic Seaport. So please help me in welcoming back Karen.
Great. Okay, well, thank you all for coming out tonight. I really appreciate on a Thursday night, people taking time from their busy schedules to come out and talk about my book. Thank you for the lovely introduction as well. And I can just tell you a little bit more. I've been writing fiction for a very long time, since I was a child. Although as I got older, it became a more serious pursuit. And now I'm also a writer at the Yale School of Management. That's my day job after journalism. But I'm always writing fiction on the side, and I'm always working on a new project. So I thought we could start. I don't know if anybody here has read Arborview, but I thought we could start talking a little bit about the book. And I'd like to read you a couple of excerpts. So Arborview is the story of two very different women. A young woman who's a college student and an older woman who's sort of an empty nester, new divorcee, looking for a way to build a new life for herself. And they're both passionate about baking pastry, and they're both at sort of junctures in their life when their lives are really going in different directions, and their paths cross. And through their relationship and their relationship with others, they kind of find new leases on life, and that's essentially the heart of the book. Everybody always asks, what is an Arborview? So I have to tell you. Arborview is the name. The main character's name is Ellen Cahill, and she has a country house. It's also set in Connecticut, the book. And it was, whereas my first novel, Homing Instincts, I set in Ledyard, nakedly stealing the real town. The setting for this, for Arborview, is a small Connecticut town, and it's sort of a hybrid between my town, Durham, where I live, and Glastonbury. Sort of in the middle, not as rural as Durham, not as built up and sort of consumer-oriented as Glastonbury. So that's where Ellen lives. She has a backyard. Her kids are in college, but her kids' old treehouse is named Arborview. And while Ellen is in this crisis in her life, her husband has left her for another woman. She's newly divorced. She's trying to figure out what and who to be in this next chapter of her life. She begins to retreat up to her children's treehouse in the backyard, just as a quiet, insulated place where she can think through things. And it reminds her, she was a practicing Catholic as a child, it reminds her of the old churches she used to be in. And she begins to feel these spiritual yearnings. And spirituality plays a big part in Arborview. And I use a lot of metaphors with nature and the trees, which is why I love my cover, because it really hit on it. So that's what Arborview is, and it's sort of a real metaphor for the journey that both of these women are undertaking. So now the two women. So I told you about Ellen Cahill, and I'd like to read you. I've read at so many events different parts of this book, but the book has two points of view. Ellen, the woman who I told you about, and then Rosa Escamilla, who is a girl from someone impoverished background. She's a community college student wants to become a pastry chef. Ellen teaches a pastry course, and Rosa is one of her students. Um, Rosa's story is that her mom emigrated from Peru, which my dad did many, many years ago. So that's sort of how I got interested in that. But uh, Rosa's sort of mom is a single mom, and she's not so hot on this whole pastry idea thing. And she'd much rather Rosa become a nurse or a teacher or something really practical. Even though you can have a great career as a pastry chef, but still, there are these prejudices. So I'm going to read sections from both points of view. It's a third person novel, but there's the two POVs. So the first one, I'm going to read a section, and it's always difficult to read a part of a novel because at least a well-constructed novel, which I hope mine is, every every part hinges and is connected to every other part. So to isolate a section is to diminish it from the rest of the book, and you always lose something. But that said, um, so in this part I'm going to read, Ellen is thinking about she's well into wanting to open up her own pastry shop, which is what she eventually ends up doing. But Alice is her best friend, two sort of best friends in town. These two ladies, her kids grew up together. Alice is a very stylish woman, and Ellen's kind of more down to earth. But Alice has, and here comes a spoiler. So Alice, boy, I hate to tell you this. Alice has betrayed Ellen in a major way, having to do with Ellen's ex-husband. We'll just leave it at that. And she's always been sort of a very dashing figure. So their friendship has ruptured. Alice is gone. Ellen is soldiering on. So, so chapter 39. Ellen turned her attention to the menu. She would have all the expected treats and delicacies: cream puffs and eclairs, brownies and blondies, fruit tarts and macaroons, scones, biscotti, ladyfingers, shortbread, and magic bars. There would be cakes made to order and seasonal pies, and a cookie of the day. But she wanted more, a signature offering, a creation that would set Just Desserts apart. That's what she's thinking the name of her shop is going to be, Just Desserts. This specialty would rotate with the seasons. 4 chances every year to leave her mark on the world, to deliver something bold and sweet and redeeming. Pastry is a defiant act in an ugly world, she had always thought. Maybe she would print this on the napkins. The shop's slogan, created by the advertising agency she'd hired, was already painted in swirling red letters across the glass door. Just Desserts. Get what's coming to you. The ad agency team, 3 kids who didn't look much older than Jimmy and Tabor, those are her children, dressed in skinny black jeans and micro miniskirts, had listened intently, scribbling notes as she described her vision for the shop. It's too dark, Mom, Tabor had warned on the phone. Nobody wants judgment with their morning coffee. Dark, Ellen had said, or edgy? I like edgy. I'm just not sure pastry is the place for it, Tabor said. Ellen sighed. What do you suggest then? How about something lighter, more, I don't know, hopeful? Isn't that what you're shooting for? Ellen hesitated. Sort of, but it's more than that. We rise. Tabor paused. Rise makes you think of baking, right? Yeast makes things rise, and puff pastry rises, and there's a certain, I don't know, transcendent quality in what you're reaching for here. Transcendent. The same thing William, who's Ellen's new boyfriend, had said. The word felt right in Ellen's mouth. She thought instantly of Arborview. Wasn't this what she had been doing in the old treehouse? Stepping into silence and connecting, she didn't know how, with something that lifted her above the fray, so she could think, so she could begin to see. She planned to open in late May, early June at the latest. She would have to call the ad agency back. They'd charge her more to change the shop's name. They'd have to print new materials. They'd have to repaint the door. But We Rise was the perfect name. She was lining the shop's walk-in kitchen pantry shelves the next afternoon when she heard the door chimes ring. She'd forgotten to lock, which she'd promised William she would do when she was alone here. She wasn't expecting any deliveries today. She put aside the organic bamboo shelf liners the salesgirl at a ritzy kitchen shop had talked her into, reached for her cell phone in her apron pocket, and headed out to the counter. Hello, she called, pushing open the swinging kitchen door. Alice stood in front of the display case. Ellen stopped. Oh, she said. Alice winced. Should I have called first? Her voice was small, uncertain. Ellen stood rooted for an instant. Then she forced her way to the counter and placed her hands on top. Alice looked strange. Were those sweatpants? They were. Gray sweats with a red hoodie sweatshirt and white tennis shoes. Ellen couldn't believe her eyes. And Alice's hair, pulled back in a stubby ponytail with silvery streaks at her temples. Ellen would have passed her right by on the street. "Are you all right?" Alice asked. She shook her head. "Of course you're not. Why would I ask such a thing? What a question coming from me of all people. Anyway, Earl, who's Alice's long-suffering husband, Earl is gone." Ellen trembled. "Earl was dead?" "He's left me," Alice said. Ellen exhaled. Alice sighed. "Are you going to talk to me at all?" "I'm sorry," Ellen said. "About Earl, I guess." "You guess." Alice, with ratty hairs and greasy hair and a husband on the lam, still raising an eyebrow of expectation, believing she was due special consideration or some magical exemption from consequences. Ellen folded her arms across her chest. "Earl finally saw through your crap and walked out. I say hooray for him." Alice raised her palms in surrender. Her fingernails were stubby and ugly and worn, like Ellen's. "I didn't come here to fight with you," she said. Ellen steadied her breathing. "Why did you come, then?" "To see how you are." Warning lights flashed in Ellen's mind, then a gentle nudge. "Do the right thing here. She has come to you. Say the right thing." But what was the right thing? "Can I at least sit down?" Alice walked to a table and dropped into a chair. "I sit across the street in the library sometimes and watch your shop." She pointed out the storefront window to the building across the green. "I love what you've done with the interior. You must be proud." Ellen moved around the counter and walked to the table. She pulled out a chair and sat. "I haven't opened yet. Let's hope I can be proud in 6 months' time." "Oh, Ellie, it will be a smash. You'll be marvelous." "Ellie." The word stung. No one but Alice had ever called Ellen that. Alice looked down at the tabletop. "I want to sit a minute with you. I know I won't be here again. There was no way back to the way we were before, is there?" There it was. No way back. Something dropped inside Ellen. A tendril of panic wound around her heart. Even after everything, part of her still wanted Alice. Ellen shook her head. "No one ever goes back, only forward. It's taken me almost 50 years to understand this. But there is a way forward if you're willing." Alice gave a weary smile. "I am where I am." "Oh, please, no more cliches, okay? What's next? It is what it is, right?" Ellen said. "Things can be what you make them, too. You can choose." Alice looked startled. Then she shrugged. "I've made a mess of my life, and I've come up empty-handed." She'd come up empty-handed. It was so typical of Alice to paint herself as the victim. Always. Why was it Ellen had never realized this about her? How can you be friends with a person for 20 years and not see a thing like this? "You know what you haven't mentioned?" Ellen asked. "Anyone else's life. What about what's happened to Earl's life, to your daughter's life, to my life?" "A person can only say sorry so many times. I'm through with sorry." Alice raised her eyes. "And you didn't get divorced because of me." Ah, a spark of the old Alice, deflecting all blame, minimizing when the truth loomed too near, changing the frame. The old spin doctor was still in there. "No, I didn't," Ellen said. "But that isn't the point, though, is it? The point isn't how or why my marriage ended. The point is how our friendship ended." Alice looked back at the tabletop. "Look, I hate the way things have gone. I wanted to tell you." She sighed. "Maybe life just hunts us all down in the end." "No," Ellen said. "Life does not hunt us down. Bad choices hunt us down. Lies and denials and cruelty eventually turn on you if you give them enough time." Alice sniffed. Not a teary sniff, but a defiant little whiff. "I see you've become quite the philosopher, Ellie," she said. Alice smiled, a cold, inflectionless flash, and Ellen sensed it, a submerged strain of rigidity that Alice was battling to hide, a reluctance to give in. Underneath it all, Alice was angry. In her mind, she had been wronged. Could the clothes, the hair, be a ploy, a strategy to gain sympathy? Would she drive straight home after this and color her hair and schedule a manicure? Had she sunk that low? A weightlessness came over Ellen, as if she had stepped into an alternate reality. "I should be getting back to work," she said. Alice made a show of looking at her watch. "Oh, it's getting late, isn't it?" They walked to the door. Alice pulled a pair of gloves from her purse, a black fur-trimmed pair Ellen knew. The sight of them made her stomach hurt. She swallowed. "Thanks for stopping by," she said. "I know it can't have been easy." "But nothing's easy anymore, Ellie, is it?" Ellen looked out at the street. A car with Alice's license plate, a sapphire Mercedes-Benz SUV, sat parked at the curb. Alice loved sapphire. Zach and Ellen had looked at those cars once, years ago. The prices were ridiculous. Even Zach, who loved all things status symbol, had balked. You got a new car, Ellen said. I traded up. I had to. Alice pulled on her gloves. My attorney told me to clean out as much cash from our joint accounts as I could before Earl files. There's no sense in letting him walk away with so much money. He'll have a much tougher time getting a car away from me. Ellen opened her mouth to speak, but couldn't get any words out. There was no point. Alice would never see herself. Ellen opened the door, and the chime jingled. A jolt of cold winter air washed over them. You take care of yourself, Ellie, Alice said. Their eyes met, and Alice rested a hand on Ellen's shoulder. Ellen swallowed hard. Yeah, you too. Alice smiled and turned away. Ellen closed the door and watched until the brilliant blue of Alice's car disappeared down Main Street. Then she locked the door. So it's one of the recurring themes in Arborview, at least in Ellen's life, is that she sort of deals with a series of losses. Her husband, her best friend, and then this new boyfriend. And without dropping a massive spoiler, it doesn't end well. So it was interesting for me to write the different ways that these different relationships dissolved, and they all dissolved for different reasons. And Alice was a really fun character to write. She's witty, she's funny. You could see how she'd be a great girlfriend to hang out with, to do fun stuff with. But she has this strain in her that eventually is aimed at Ellen. And you know, a lot of people, or some of the folks who were readers for me on this book, wanted a reconciliation, wanted a better ending. And I resisted that because I felt like that's probably not what would happen. And I wanted to be realistic. But does anybody have any questions about the Ellen character, about her trajectory, about what's happening? It's tough, again, to talk about a novel that you haven't read and you've only heard 4 pages from. But I tried to give you a little crash course. I will read now, if you'd like, a little section from Rosa Escamilla's storyline, which is very different and has very different energy. And I have to say, of the two voices that I wrote, and I probably enjoyed Rosa's more because it was hipper and it was very slangy and just sort of fun. And so Rosa is, I've already explained, she's a student who wants to be a pastry chef, and she becomes Ellen's student. Her Mama, is dead set against culinary school for Rosa. Javier, her brother, is going to study engineering at Niagara University, and which is a really bitter pill for Rosa to swallow because Mom is really happy about Javi, but she's not so happy about Rosa's choice. So, oh, and her mom works as a hostess in a ritzy restaurant, which is another reason that she hates the food industry. When Mama got home from work, you needed to give her time to herself. Re-entry, she called it. Javier called it decompression. Night after night, Mama smiled and took coats and led diners to their tables. She stood in for bus boys in a pinch, filling glass tumblers with ice and lugging stacks of dirty dishes back to the kitchen. If they were down a waitress or waiter, she took drink orders to get things rolling. Her feet hurt and her voice grew hoarse by the time the conversations in the dining room reached full force. For all its elegance, the place was loud. The part that amazes me, even after all of these years, is how entitled these people are, she said. They think they were born to have their butts kissed. Mama, you've been saying this for years. Rosa stood at the stove stirring a pot of hot chocolate, homemade. She selected the chocolate herself, based on what Mrs. Cahill, Ellen, used at home. A nice hot cup of this will put it all out of your mind. Mama sighed at the kitchen table. You're the cook, she said. She leaned back and put her feet up on the chair next to her. They're killing me. Last week I wore those flats, remember? The black ones, sure. They were perfect with your outfit. Not perfect enough. They weren't heels, and the manager, I see him giving me his fishy eye all night. And you know, the next day, bam, he hands out a memo to everyone. Formal dress is required for all employees in the dining room. Blah, blah, blah. He's a spiteful little bastard. Rosa laughed. He's a jerk. Javier's voice floated downstairs. He was studying his room. His girlfriend Tilda was up there with him. Mama raised her eyes to the ceiling. They both up there? She mouthed silently. Rosa nodded. Hola, Tilda, Mama called. I hope you two are doing homework and not making me a grandmother. Mama! Rosa whirled around from the stove. Shush! Mama glared. The last thing I want is Javier can't go to Niagara University because he's going to be a daddy, like so many of you kids. Drop out and get a lousy job. All this hard work. All my hard work for nothing. Javi's too smart for that. Rosa carried a steaming mug of creamy cocoa to the table and placed it before her mother. No man's too smart, Rosa said. You'll see. I'm sorry, Mama said. You'll see. Every woman finds out in time. Drink, Rosa commanded. They sat in silence. As Mama sipped, her expression softened. How are your classes going? Have you looked into the nurse's aid course? Genevieve, the waitress, has a daughter who's finishing and already has job offers. 3. Mama raised 3 fingers. Good jobs, Rosa. Real money. I know, Rosa said. The heavy makeup Mama wore had blurred on her face, leaving faint rosy swipes on her cheeks and mascara shadows beneath her eyes. Listen, Rosa said. I got a job. She slid to the edge of her seat. My pastry teacher is catering a party, only desserts, and she asked me to help make them. What's she paying you? $200. But it's an honor, Mama, and a chance to learn. Mrs. Cahill is very good. She gave me a book about a famous writer who cooks. The book is famous, too. You're getting robbed, Mama said. But she reached out with one hand and cupped Rosa's chin. Ah, money is money, right? And at least you got the hospice job, too. I know you'll have a good time doing this baking, though. Rosa has a part-time job in a hospice, which is a whole other part of this book, and she makes a friend there. And anyway, I love it, Rosa. I love it. Rosa struggled to keep her voice on an even keel. Make a cake for your brother before he leaves us, Mama sighed. Javi will never leave us. You say that now, and I love my boy. God knows I do, but he's still a man. We're not going there tonight. Rosa glared at her mother. Why would he leave when he's got you as a cheering section? Mama raised an eyebrow. You got anything more you want to say? I just said it. A nervous bird flapped inside Rosa's chest. Not now, not yet. But she couldn't stop herself. It's not right, she said. Ah, the baking school, college, Rosa said. Life ain't about right. It's about being smart, said Mama, who had never made one smart decision in her life, as far as Rosa could tell. I know what I'm doing, Rosa's heart pounded. Is that so? Rosa opened her mouth to bite back, to snap Mama's head off, but then she stopped. It was as if Mama had aged right before Rosa's eyes. Rosa saw the puffy flesh of Mama's face, the pale patches of scalp peeking through her thinning hair, and the sigh? There was something heavy, final in it, defeat. Sign up for the nursing, Mama said. Be smarter than your old mother. Don't break her heart. The words pierced Rosa. I'm not trying to break your heart, Mama. When Rosa was little, she saw a picture of a real heart in science class at school. Was it 3rd grade or 4th? The heart looked nothing like a valentine. Rosa imagined her mother's heart, all pink and lumpy like the picture, beating away day and night. Mama yelled so much back then. Rosa was afraid her heart would simply give out. Some colossal shock or outrage would blow it up. And then where would they all be? Every night, Rosa had asked God to keep Mama's heart beating. On her knees before her bed, she had prayed, please, God, please. So that's a little look into Rosa's situation. And you can imagine as these two storylines converge in the novel, they both influence each other, these two women from very different backgrounds, but really yearning for the same thing. Um, and that's the trajectory of the book. So can I answer? I mean, I have some points, to bring up to talk about with the book, but I'd like to, yeah, please. Um, that's a great question, and for me, it goes right to the genesis of the whole story. So, writers come up with ideas for their books in different ways, but for me, um, this, my stories are always character driven, and it's usually that I conceive of, or I'm called to, or I have a feeling for a particular individual who's in a particular situation. And whatever they're facing, whatever they're dealing with appeals to me, and I want to see what's going to happen to them and how they're going to get through what's happening in their lives. Um, and that's how. And then it just sort of it's I conceive of someone in a fix, someone grappling with some problem, and then the specifics of the person, their background, who they are, come together as I begin writing. But that first moment of sort of like recognition, oh, I'm interested in you, is because of what's happening to them. So yeah, so that's how I think. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, yeah, I know. A planner or a pantser, everybody asks that. I'm a bit of both. I start out Um, when I start out, I'm a pantser, and I kind of just write that the first 10 pages or something because I know it's sort of the voice and sort of the energy and the feeling that I want the narrative to have, or I think I do at that point. But then, and then sort of I realize when the narrative arc starts becoming a little bit clear, there's like, I'll look ahead and say, okay, I know I want this to happen one third through, this to happen halfway through, this to happen three quarters through. So I know there are these big moments that I'm shooting for. But all of the narrative arc that fills in the big moments is completely organic. So I know I want to get there, but I'm not sure how I'm going to get there. And it's through the process that you discover how you're going to get to the next plot point, or at least I do. And it's surprising. That's where it starts to change and things start to happen. And sometimes it changes the next plot point, what happens in the process. But I have a feeling for, and sometimes I usually have a feeling for what the end's going to be too before, but it's the trajectory of what happens to get them there. That's interesting. So, yes.
You say you've been writing since you were a young child.
Yes.
Were there particular books then you were reading that you were reading and then you were writing yourself that has influenced how you approach writing and your characters?
Oh yeah, I think so. When I was in elementary school, so I'm a huge animal lover, as my son sitting there will tell you. And your question's next, buddy. Okay. Um, so I was like, I don't know, third, fourth, fifth grade. I was reading all these books about all these animal dramas, um, all the Mender de Jong books. The I think it was a French Canadian or French the children's author. Wonderful, wonderful books. And with uh, I don't want to mangle the man's name. Meindert de Jong, Dejong, and Maurice Sendak did some of his illustrations. So they were partnered for a while. But he wrote a series of wonderful, really sophisticated children's books with animals as the main characters, but the animals had these huge, complicated, sort of emotional and psychological lives. And because I was an animal lover, I liked considering those things, but I'd rather see them in animals than people at 10 for whatever reason. um, so yeah, but did those books? Yeah, I mean those books. I think the books you read when you're really young leave an indelible impression on you. And then I read The Yearling when I was very young because my uh, parents had a lot of books, and I had no more books, and I just started pulling books from their shelf. I was too young to read The Yearling. I won the Pulitzer, but 9 or 10. But it was about a deer, so it had to be good. But some of those rhythms of the sentences, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, her descriptions of nature, when I began writing, that all made a difference to me. I had absorbed more of that, than I realized. Um, yeah. So yeah. Easy. Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the real, the people that you meet along the way. Not so much my major characters, Rosa and Ellen. They're pretty fictional, but the minor characters, and I love writing minor characters because they're fun. I don't have to invest as much in them, but you have to invest enough, of course, to make them, to make them real flesh and blood people. But the minor characters, I think, were drawn from sort of a compendium of a lot of different individuals and characteristics that I've known. No one is patterned on anyone, which I always like to say because people always think it's about, it's about you. No, it's not. Um, so it's but yeah, I think everyone who's interesting that you meet leaves some little impression or some little gem that you mine later as a writer. They never know you're mining it, but and I like to keep it that way. Yeah. So yeah.
Do you write every day, or do you have like a schedule, or time calls you, or
Yeah.
morning better than night? Or...
Yeah, I'm pretty flexible about morning and night. I used to be able to write any time when I was younger. Now I find sort of the middle of the day is the best time for me. Um, but when I'm in the heat of a project, when I'm really working on something, I'll write every day. For the most part, I do it like 5 days a week, that type of thing. Um, but then I'll go for a while without writing, where I'm kind of like when I finish, I'm now working on a new project after Arborview, but I did nothing for a few months. I just kind of let it settle and which seems to be my, I admire writers who write all the time, who are always at their craft every day. And when I'm on a project, I'm one of them, but I do take breaks. And I find it helpful. I think everyone's process is kind of unique and kind of different. So, yeah.
I'm not familiar with the work. Have you written short stories?
Yes.
And of the two, how do you feel about them? And how do you approach each of the novel versus the short story?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I'm working. I've after publishing two novels, I'm back to short stories now. And I had considered starting a new novel after Arborview, and I had an idea for one, and it's still there. I really like the idea, and I want to do it, but not quite yet. I think I needed. It's such a long slog to write a novel, and the thought of sort of committing to another few years to write up teen drafts of 400 or 500 pages and see it through. I just didn't feel like I had it in me right now. So I've kind of gone back to the short story, and I really like to change form. I like it a lot. It brings a new energy. I'm trying new things, and you have to keep it. When you commit to a novel, I'm interested in my new idea, but I'm not interested enough to stay the course. And you really have to be passionate to stay the course in a novel. I was passionate about Arborview just to get through it. The first draft, never mind the many rewrites that you'll have to do afterward. But so of the two, I mean, I wrote short stories first, and my first novel, um, Homing Instincts, yeah, yeah, and that's actually set in Ledyard and in the Mystic area. Um, but was a real experiment. I didn't even know if I could sustain a narrative for that long. And when I look back at it, I'm proud of it. It's a first novel. It feels like a first novel to me, even though I'm still have affection for it. Um, and it was the first person point of view. It was a very careful little book. I was very careful with what I tried and to see if I could just see what it felt like, sort of structurally and technically to make it work, because it's very different than a short story to sustain for that long. Um, so I like them both, but I like them both for different reasons. Right now, I'm very happy back in the short story format. I think I will try the novel again, but it's not this year. Not you know.
You have particular, when you do short stories, particular subjects, or is it people driven again, or
Yeah, they're all character driven. I find all my fictions very character driven because I always conceive of it. And maybe it narrows my scope. It probably does, but I always come upon my stories in the same way. Always, it is an individual and very much an individual, no matter what group that they're a part of or how they. It's very much an individual person's story, and something that they're grappling with in their lives. And the short story is the same way. I sort of come upon those ideas the same way, just in a much more condensed. I remember I had an old professor who said, um, a novel is about a lifetime. A short story is about a moment in a life. And right now, the moments are good, you know. Um, but yeah, in the sense of what draws me to the material, it's the same. Yeah. Hmm.
and with the short story format, let's say you have an idea and it's a moment that a day or a life or whatever, but how do you come up with enough? If it's a moment, how do you develop that moment so that you can actually come up with X amount of words
Yes.
to make it a short story that a moment just really is hard to develop
Yeah.
and have something that somebody is going to read and remember several
Hmm.
years down the road. And how do you get that whole moment?
Well, I think you don't. It's that's sort of the stepped back academic way of describing the short story as a moment. When it's all over, you realize that it was about a moment, but it's a very ponderous telling moment. It's a very ponderous, serious sort of. I'm not close enough to this. It's sort of a very serious, ponderous, revealing moment. So it's rich. It's like a turning point. It's an epiphany moment. It's a moment, again, someone's grappling with something and it climaxes, and the climaxes happens a lot sooner in the short story and resolves much more quickly. Um, but I don't conceive of it, and a lot of it is the way that you're approaching the material. I don't think I'm going to write about a moment. I think this isn't going to spin out into a novel. I can tell. I don't want to go that far into the background, the history, the everything, but I'm going to encapsulate something really serious and important here in this person's life in a very condensed form. It's actually more difficult in many ways in a novel, when you look at it that way. Um, but it's important to not fall into the trap of thinking it'll be shorter and easier. It's not necessary. It's shorter, but it's not easier. It's just psychologically right now, I need to be able to end more quickly. Some of it's keeping yourself going too. It's like I can, get a good short story draft in 4 months. I can't get a good novel draft in 4 months. Maybe some people can, I can't. So in some ways you have to gauge your energy level and your interest and sort of where you feel where you are creatively at the moment. And because if I've ever tried to sort of force myself to do something, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. I have to really be called to the material and want to enter into this world and walk with this character every day, you know. So yeah.
So we were talking earlier about the covers of your book and how there's different recipes for cover, are there any other things about publishing that you learned as you went along that you, as a normal reader, you don't think about?
Yeah, yeah. So publishing has always been a very, very difficult business. And I heard it described recently in the book I'm reading by Sigrid Nunez as right now it's a raft in the ocean, and I'm paraphrasing her with it's a raft and too many people are trying to climb on. It's a great way of looking at it. Um, but it's very, very difficult to get published now. I mean, it depends what you're writing to. Nonfiction is easier. Genre fiction like romance or thrillers or something that has a built-in market that publishing houses know how to go after. It's sort of a quantified thing. It's easier to publish in those genres. But sort of literary fiction or mainstream fiction, commercial fiction, women's fiction, there's all these labels. It's difficult. It's really difficult. And most folks want to go the route of an agent, and you try, and sometimes you get one, sometimes you don't. I published both my novels with small presses, both of which have treated me really well. Covered everything and been really supportive, and it's been good, especially for early books. It's been a very gentle way to sort of wade into publishing novels. I had a number of agents who were interested in Arborview, but just didn't feel like they had the market for it, and that's what you hear a lot right now. So this was an unagented novel that I sold to the Wild Rose Press in New York, um, and they were an absolutely terrific partner to work with. They were doing a lot of genre fiction, but they were looking to branch into mainstream, commercial, women's, that sort of thing, which this book fit into well enough. And they were a terrific partner. They gave me a lot of say. Not as much say as my first book, but they really took what I thought into account, and they were really nice to work with. But it's the publishing industry right now. Obviously, there were fewer houses, there were fewer bookstores. It's tough, and I tell anybody who's interested in publishing to really, I think to be a writer of fiction, of any serious fiction, you really have to do it because there's something inside you that finds the process healing and enlightening and important. Important. We all reach, I'm going to quit. And I remember once in my 20s, I was like, why am I doing this? I can get a better job, make more money, it'd be a lot easier. And then there was something in me that said, because these stories matter, because these characters, because what happens and what we're saying is vitally important. It's vitally important to me, and you feel a compulsion, a need to share that with other people. And if you're doing it because of that, do it. But if you're doing it for any other reason, I don't know that I would, just because of the odds, unless you really feel compelled to do this, and I mean, I'm thrilled that I've been able to publish 2 novels. Thrilled. If you had asked me 30 years ago, I would have said, yeah, that'll happen. But I think when you're really called to story, and when you're really moved by character, um, and you really work and you listen and you're willing to rewrite and you're willing to look at your own work again and you hustle, you can do it. You can. It may not be in the New York Times bestseller list, but if you're really devoted to your craft and you care about what you're doing, not just to be popular or to sell a lot of books, but because you believe in literature and in its redemptive power, do it. But be realistic, get a job. So, yeah, which kind of makes me think of there was one quote that I brought that I wanted to share with you all today because I stumbled upon it in this past year, and it says so much to me about writing and about why we do this. So one of as I've gotten older, sort of themes of spirituality and people on spiritual quests, spiritual meaning, connection with something larger, really permeate all of my work now. And I did not intend that to happen. I look back to my 20s, it was even beginning then. But for me, that is one of the critical elemental questions, that we face in this life. Is there something else? And if there is, what is it and what do I do about it? There's nothing new about this, and I'm certainly not going to answer it. But I'm just saying it's something I think about a lot. So, but this is a quote that I came upon from Catherine Patterson, an author, a wonderful person who's affiliated with the Calvin Center for Faith and Writing, which has a marvelous festival every year. And this is from one of her speeches that she gave. And I love its humility and its honesty, and I love the way that she puts it right out there. So I'll just share this one quote with you guys because I really love it. So she says, "I know my gift is limited. I know I cannot stand toe to toe with philosophers or theologians and solve for myself or anyone else the problem of evil, either natural or moral. But we who are writers can tell a story or write a poem, and where rational argument will always fail, somehow, miraculously, in metaphor and simile and image and simple narrative, there is both healing and illumination." And it almost brought a tear to my eye when I read this, because I said, she just said the whole thing. If you feel that way about doing it, it's bringing you healing and illumination, then do it. And do it for, because you need to for yourself. So yeah, but I did want to share that because it really kind of cuts to the core for me. So I'm just trying to think of are there any folks here who are writers who want to, I can kind of point out some good resources, writing books that I've read along the way that I found helpful. I went to the fellowship in my introduction that was mentioned at the Collegeville Institute last summer. It's fabulous. I worked with Michael McGregor. It was a week just to write, all paid for. It was a gift from God. It was. But so there was a lot of sort of brainstorming and a lot of support. And these were some of the gems that he shared with our group last summer. And I just jotted a few down. Just when he's talking specifically about the writing process itself, and when you're pumping it out and how you should be looking at it and feeling about it. And these aren't connected in any way. They're random, but they all sort of really capture something. He said, "Whatever is withheld in the process is lost. So when you're writing, just get it out. Write it down. You can cut it later. Always never stop if you want to get it out. Get it out and you can fix it later." And I really love this one. "A good story doesn't resolve, but it finds a place to rest." And I think I'm really drawn to that. I've always resisted the tidy endings where things are fixed because it doesn't seem realistic to me. Usually that's quite often not what happens. It's more like you've moved on to something else. But whatever has happened finds a place to rest, which I really liked. And then he said, working with language. When you're working with language, strive for what is true, necessary, and possible. Because language is a tricky, we're trying to capture, I think as you said, with words, which are often such obtuse and dull instruments. We always were musicians, but we're not, because quite frankly, I think they do it better. But when you're working with words, you're trying to capture these fleeting moments, and it's just put it all out there. He also said, and this is great practical advice, sometimes you just feel stuck when you're writing. You've got nothing to say, or you don't know what to say, or you don't think what you're saying is any good. When you feel stuck, write about something you love, whether that's your kids, or chocolate chip cookies, or your new car, whatever it is. It gets you going, gets you thinking about language in a different way, and it gets you passionate, and you can find that sort of spark, that little bit of resonance. It helps me. And then I can just, if anybody has more questions, I'm happy to take them, of course.
What was his name again, and where did you take the class?
Michael McGregor. McGregor, yeah, McGregor. And it was the Collegeville Institute in outside of Minneapolis. I contribute to their online magazine there. I'm one of the folks who contributes, and it's so the Collegeville Institute, and they give out writing fellowships, and you can freelance for them, and it's sort of a center based on it's on the campus of St. John's College, and it's sort of based on they sort of build themselves as publications and seminars about uh, where contemporary culture intersects with religion, and it's sort of defined in this very broad way. So it's sort of a very broad umbrella for people who are interested in thinking and looking at those topics. But they're very open, you know. Um, yeah. So, but some of the other just books on writing, guides or manuals that I think are really helpful. One is On Writing by Stephen King, who is a fabulous writer. And people think of him as a horror writer. He's so much more than that. Not to denigrate horror at all. I wish I could write horror, but he's really down to earth, and he gives just really good advice in this. It's one of those great tomes. Um, the famous On Becoming a Novelist by John Gardner, which I think every MFA student reads. Um, there's a wonderful book called Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott, about building narrative and writing. And there's sort of a very, which I read in college, Writing Down the Bones by Natalie Goldberg. It's sort of a very inspirational manual about approaching writing as a craft and as a discipline. So, yeah. So. It had an effect on how I had to market the book, because it was really tough to have any. I did a lot of Zoom meetings and Zoom events, which actually I kind of got to like. It's a little weird being on the screen and you see yourself and all. It's a little weird, but it made it harder to sell the book for sure, because you couldn't have as many in-person things. But it on the writing part, no, it probably actually helped, because I had, I wasn't spending an hour commuting every day and running around and doing all these things. And um, we're all concerned about the pandemic and what happened, but I wasn't overly fearful. I mean, I was concerned, as we all are, but I felt that this too will get right. The world's not going to end right now in 2020. Um, so it didn't really hurt my writing. It hurt the business end, but it didn't impact me negatively as a writer. No, no. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm obtuse or insensitive, but it didn't. Yeah. Yes.
Do you have any favorite reading now?
Yes. And I wrote this down because I always get this question, and I get asked it, and then I can't think of anything. It's terrible. So I just wrote down the names of most of them are contemporary or more contemporary writers who are among my favorites, and who really influenced me. And I'll just read it down. Ann Tyler, for sure. Marilyn Robinson, Anne Lamott, Alice Munro. I love her work. She's amazing. Um, John Irving, Andre Dubus III, who was, I think, one of the best American writers. Andre Dubus III. His dad was the famous short story writer, and the third is, Andre, and his last name is Dubus, D-U-B-U-S, the third. If you some of his movies haven't turned into books, or some of his books haven't turned into movies that have done quite well, so you may have heard of them from there. Wally Lamb, Dennis McFarland, Updike, back in the 70s and the 80s. Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings through childhood. The Yearling had such a big impression on me, and I think everything I've read or written since the age of 10 or 11 when I read it, it has always resonated. I'm reading a book called The Friend by Sigrid Nunez right now, which is really, especially if you're interested in writing, you'll really enjoy that novel. It's very much sort of an inside baseball, but it's a lot more than that. When I was younger, Graham Greene, Yves Lenoir, the British writers, Chekhov, of course, F. Scott Fitzgerald when I was younger. So that's sort of a smattering, but I'm always, discovering new writers. And it's amazing to me how many people are out there who are really good and really talented and interesting. And it's just, it's the raft with too many people trying to climb on, metaphor again. But it's also a delight that you can always find someone new and interesting. So, yeah. Yes.
How long did it take you from start to finish everything?
With Arborview? 4 years. Yeah. Yeah. But there might have been a period of a month or two where I put it down because life intervened, Yeah, when I work, I tend to be very dogged, and I'm seeing that in this process now. I need to put it down for longer. You learn. I look back, I'm proud of this book. I really like this book. There are moments I think that are really wonderful in it, but I'd like to go through it again. I wish I could take another swipe. Some of the dialogue feels heavy, some of it I think we always feel that way. Thank God it ends, because, if you kept editing, it would never end. At some point, you have to let it go. Um, but it's, moving on to the next process. I see the mistakes I made in this, and then on my collection that I'm working on now, which is totally different. I'm bringing what I've learned from this and trying to avoid some of those pitfalls. And I think one of my weaknesses in my process is that I work very hard, and I'm impatient to get it done, and I have to watch that, because sometimes you need to leave it alone. Maybe if I'd let it sit for a year and come back, I would have caught the boo-boos or more of them. But it just wasn't the way it went. I needed to move on, and it's okay, because you'll learn, and it's out there, and it's all part of the process. Yeah, but 4 years, soup to nuts. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is a long time. That's why I'm saying you've got to really be interested in these characters and in making the thing better. You know, and my idea for my new novel, I like even better than this, much better. It's very compelling, but I don't feel I have the devotion right now. And now that I understand better what it takes, I want to wait till I'm really ready, because I don't want to get 100 pages in and get lost. I want to try, even though that happens, and you can learn from that, and you can always go back to it. But I needed something after this long journey. I just needed quick, short, and I wanted to try and experiment technically and play with language more without this huge commitment. You know, you have to kind of trick yourself and keep yourself going sometimes too. Yeah. So. Okay. Yeah. Um, and that's I don't want to give away the end, of the book, as I said, but I will say that, I felt like the end of this book, there was because there's, Ellen, my main character, gets involved in a new relationship. There was, some of my readers thought, let them, let it go well, let it up, let it be this happy ending. But, this book, I wanted to stay true to the vision that it was about Ellen and Rose's journey to their own true selves and their own true identities. And the idea that they were going to jump into another relationship and that was going to fix it, first of all, it doesn't happen. It's not cynical. No, but on top of it, it wouldn't have resonated, and it wouldn't have honored the journeys that these women have taken. There's time enough for that later, but I really wanted to stay just with them and see what would happen. So I'm glad that I resisted. There was some pressure to say, oh no, let them work it out and let it be, but no. So sometimes you have to do that. You have to kind of stand up. That's actually part of the learning process too. And when I was younger, I would have changed it if somebody had said that. And I still change an awful lot, but it's learning to trust your own instincts, and learning when your instincts are not right. And it's a real dance, and it's different from story to story, from book to book. Sometimes if you know something violates the spirit of what you want to do, this is what it comes down to for me. If I know it violates the vision that I have, it's wrong. But anything else is up for grabs. And I think that's how you make your work better. Yeah.
Your characters come to life for you in a way that you feel like they talk with you sometimes, you dream about them, or maybe even argue with them sometimes. I don't know.
I get frustrated with them sometimes. I do not dream about them. Yeah, no, I don't dream about them. They never. Their emotional states come to life for me. What they're dealing with, their pain, their hurt, what they're seeing, that comes to life for me. Or that resonates with me, and then I give them the language for it. But I don't. That's pretty much as far as it goes. I don't dream about them. They don't talk to me. That's okay, Yeah. So, yeah, you're so welcome. I really enjoyed sharing this with everyone, and it's always really gratifying to be able to share your work with people. And some of the reviews I've gotten on Arborview, on Amazon and elsewhere, I'm amazed at how much the story has resonated, especially with women, how much it has resonated and how much people have seen in it. And, when I read those, as difficult as a process as this is, it is unbelievably gratifying and sort of weirdly gratifying to have made something up. and have somebody else look at it and understand exactly what you meant and have it move and touch them. It's an enormous privilege to be able to do that. So I always take it. Anybody who reads my book and has enjoyed it and lets me know that, it sounds corny, but it's really true. That is the point, that's why you did it. And I've been really humbled and appreciative of the number of people who have come forward to me and said, I love this. I love this part. I can't believe that happened. How did you think of this? And so it's been a great journey. I'm glad it's over, but it's been a great. Thank you all.